Here is the most important play in the history of American-Soviet basketball relations. In the mid-20th century, while the United States was building a basketball superpower, the Soviet Union tracked right behind. And then, at the 1972 Olympic final in Munich, 20-year-old Russian center Alexander Belov hit a buzzer-beating layup to give the USSR a 51-50 win over the United States and their first gold medal in men's basketball. The Soviet Sports Federation saw the momentous dethroning of a bitter rival. USA Basketball saw a travesty and never conceded defeat. NBA executives saw a third thing. That boy Belov could hoop. Now, no Soviet-born player had ever joined the NBA. NBA players were still disqualified from Olympic competition, and it was also the middle of the Cold War. But in 1975, the New Orleans Jazz drafted Alexander Belov 161st overall. Now, an NBA draft pick isn't a contract, it's just a claim. The Jazz wanted to sign Belov and believed he liked them back. They sent a Ukrainian-American team executive to the Soviet embassy to make the case. After some hope, the answer was absolutely not. The Soviets weren't going to disqualify an Olympic star for the benefit of an American club. The Jazz hoped feelings might change after the 76 games, but it never came to pass. In 1978, when Belov was just 26, he died of a rare cancer. Alexander Belov would not become the first Soviet player in the NBA. But someone would. These guys were clearly NBA material. Who? How? Follow me. Hey, real quick. I want to let you know that this video is part of our new mini-series called the Donnie Expedition. It's all about the history of international players in the NBA draft, and we are only able to do it because of all of our patrons. If you want to see more special stuff like this and see it exclusively or sooner than everyone else, please come check out Secret Base on Patreon. Okay, back to me. Here we are in the draft cavern. Every player ever picked in every draft in NBA history. As always, I invite you to pause and read the waiver, especially the first part. Alexander Belov was from present-day Russia. Back then, it was the Soviet Union. They didn't want him in the NBA, so why was he draftable? NBA draft eligibility has changed over time, but there are two broad ways to qualify: automatic or voluntary. Automatic is most traditional. To oversimplify, the year you finish college and or turn 22, you are eligible for the draft. Since the early 1970s, when Spencer Haywood beat the NBA in court, players can instead voluntarily declare for the draft if they're above a minimum age. Once the NBA gave up enforcing a hardship rule for underclassmen, early entry became a common path to the league, especially for the best prospects. Still, automatic eligibility accounts for a handful of draftees each year and for every 22-year-old/college graduate on Earth who doesn't get picked. I went undrafted in 2011. Still a free agent if anyone wants me. So Alexander Belov didn't choose to enter the 1975 NBA draft. And honestly, I'm not even sure he was eligible. Belov was born in 1951, so I believe he should have been draftable in 1973 and an undrafted free agent thereafter. I've asked several experts, and as far as I can tell, the NBA just wasn't strict yet about this. They were more concerned with minimum age than maximum. If New Orleans got closer to signing Belov, maybe the league would have intervened. I don't know. Stay tuned. After that failed experiment, nobody bothered to even draft a Soviet player for a while. Basically, same story for socialist Yugoslavia. Georgi Glushkov, who actually signed with Phoenix in 1985, came from Bulgaria, a smaller Eastern Bloc country with a relatively relaxed sports federation. And even that was kind of an ordeal. Still, players behind the Iron Curtain were clearly good enough to help an NBA team. That could be your NBA team if only you could persuade the authorities. If only you had the clout, the moxie. If only... When Ted Turner bought the Atlanta Hawks, he had just been suspended by Major League Baseball for tampering on behalf of the Atlanta Braves, whom he also owned. That would not be the last time Turner meddled in Braves affairs, but Ted promised to be a hands-off NBA owner. He was just not a basketball guy. Ted was an Atlanta guy, a publicity guy, a money guy, and above all else, a television guy. The Hawks served him on all fronts. To manage his new possession, Ted Turner hired a veteran basketball executive, but he didn't last. So Turner passed general managing duties over to a season ticket holder, literally. He got overwhelmed and passed the gig to someone more experienced, who didn't last either. Nobody wanted to run Ted's Hawks the way Ted liked, so Ted said, fine, let the kid do it. The kid was Stan Kasten. In 1976, Stan Kasten graduated law school with a job offer from a fancy law firm. To celebrate, he took a road trip visiting baseball stadiums. One day, at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, Stan ran into Ted Turner. One thing led to another. Stan bailed on the law firm to draw up contracts for Ted's teams, learning on the job how they operate. And in 1980, the buck passed to 28-year-old Stan Kasten. Stan's off-chance meeting with Ted Turner grew into a legendary career in sports. But we're here for this part. Back in 1970, Hawks GM Marty Blake made minor history by drafting, although never signing, 2 foreign-born players direct from the Italian League. Neither had ever played college ball in the U.S. In the mid-'80s, Kasten's Hawks turned their attention back overseas because Stan had found a loophole. Today, we would call this draft and stash. Leaning on Blake's resources and those of internal scout Richard Kaner, Atlanta used late picks in 4 straight drafts to acquire rights to players from numerous countries, including the USSR, which had gone untouched since '75. Atlanta believed they had a private tunnel under the Iron Curtain: Ted Turner. Ted did deals in Moscow. Ted knew Mikhail Gorbachev personally. When the US and USSR boycotted each other's Olympics, Ted paid to bring both federations to his own mini-Olympics. He was doing his best to thaw the Cold War. If anyone could convince the Russians to let a player join the NBA, it was Ted Turner. Now, I just said Russians, and Moscow was indeed running things, but remember that several other presently independent nations were once part of the Soviet Union. And yes, I'm making the Soviet Union green, not red. There's no rule that says it has to be red. I can do whatever I want. I can make Spain turtles. The USSR's best player in the 80s was Arvydas Sabonis, a bear-like balletic center, inventive passer, charismatic, unmistakably talented enough to star in the NBA. Even if Americans didn't know the difference, Sabonis was not Russian. His native Lithuania was an occupied Soviet constituent state, a repressed people on the verge of revolution. Lithuania's vaunted basketball federation had long since been subsumed by that of the USSR. We're not going to go too deep on that topic, so I highly recommend this documentary. In league play, Sabonis starred for his hometown club, Zalgiris. He led them to a 1985 title against the Soviet Army team, and you can tell that was special for him. In international competition, Sabonis had to wear red. Sabonis won MVP, leading the USSR to the 1985 Eurobasket Championship. That was cool too. Days later, Arvydas Sabonis was the 77th overall pick in the 1985 NBA draft, by the Atlanta Hawks, of course. Stan Kasten knew that signing Sabonis would be a long shot, even with Ted's help, but still, why not? The answer to Stan's question was on Sabonis' birth certificate. December 19th, 1964. Sabonis would not turn 22 until 1986. He was not eligible in '85. The NBA voided the Hawks pick. The rest of the Sabonis saga is a tale for another time, but a lot happened in '86. And the Hawks blew their chance to draft him legally. They tried to trade up, but the Portland Trail Blazers got Sabonis with just the 24th pick in the 1986 draft. With Sabonis off the board, the Hawks claimed 2 other Soviets in '86. They had new hope, Word was that after the 1988 Olympics, the IOC would allow NBA players to join their national teams. The Soviet Federation might soften. And these two were actual draft-eligible 22-year-olds. So was he, but nobody bothered to pick him. Nobody in the NBA thought much of him in 1986. Well, maybe one guy did. Don Nelson was born in 1962 in Iowa City. That's Don with two N's. We're just going to call him Donnie like everyone else does. Sarunas Marciulionis was born in 1964 in Kaunas, Lithuania, USSR. Donnie's family moved around because his father, Don with one N, got drafted out of Iowa in '62 and played on 3 NBA teams until 1976 when he retired to begin his coaching career in Milwaukee. Sarunas' parents were not basketball players. Young Sarunas was a talented but not all that serious tennis prodigy, a lefty who refused to hit a backhand. That pursuit was interrupted by a terrifying accident at age 13 when he was messing around with homemade explosives. Donnie was pursuing a D1 basketball scholarship until 1982, when his father abruptly left the family. Donnie chose to instead attend college close to his mother, Sharon. Sarunas took up basketball as a teenager and grew to 6'5" with enormous hands. But he attended Vilnius University to focus on journalism. He played only occasionally for his college team. Donnie played all 4 years at Wheaton College, but understood he was not NBA material. Sarunas showed enough talent as a late-blooming hooper to get opportunities with a middling Lithuanian club and with the Soviet national junior team. At his mother Sharon's urging, Donnie spent summers playing for Athletes in Action, a traveling Christian sports ministry. AIA scheduled exhibitions against club, college, and national teams the world over, often beating them. In 1985, the summer before Donnie's senior year, AIA visited Vilnius, where Donnie got cooked by a powerful lefty guard. They met again for a Soviets vs. AIA rematch in California. Though Donnie and Sarunas didn't speak the same language, they bonded over competition. Enough that in 1987, when a stranger approached Sarunas pleading for help, Sarunas contacted his friend in the US. Donnie obliged and also determined he had more business with Sarunas Marciulionis. Since college, Donnie had dipped into NBA scouting, most recently for the Golden State Warriors. Meanwhile, Sarunas had blossomed. He got a belated shot with the Soviet senior team and led them in scoring at Eurobasket 1987. That same June, Don Nelson, the father, became a Warriors executive. Don and Donnie, once distant, were now co-workers with the '87 NBA draft weeks away. The scout/son caught his boss/father up to speed on this thrilling prospect. The Warriors weren't gonna burn a tippy-top draft pick on a kid they'd have to wrestle away from the Soviets, even with rule changes in the air, but through 5 rounds, Marciulionis remained unpicked. Donnie met Sarunas because of basketball. They reconnected to save a child's life, only to realize how much more basketball they had to offer one another. Donnie believed Sarunas could be a gem in his scouting resume. Sarunas believed Donnie could be his ticket out of the Soviet Union. June 22, 1987 would be the dawn of a new chapter in an unlikely friendship and a new era in NBA history. With the 127th pick in the 1987 NBA draft, the Golden State Warriors selected. They should have known. The Warriors should have noticed that the Soviet-friendly, draft and stash-obsessed Hawks showed no interest in picking Sarunas. The Hawks knew something. On June 13th, Sarunas Marciulionis had turned 23. He was no longer draft eligible. We know the league was once kind of lax about that stuff, but Stan Kasten had just gotten burned trying to draft a brilliant Lithuanian who was too young to be eligible. He was not going to let someone get away with drafting a brilliant Lithuanian who was too old. Stan snitched. The NBA voided the pick. Sarunas Marciulionis, who technically went undrafted in 1986, was a free agent. But was he really? the Soviets promised to let guys join the NBA if they won gold at the '88 Olympics. The Hawks had Ted Turner's connections and the rights to two of Sarunas' national teammates. Marshallonis to Atlanta, however you want to spell that, looked like a done deal. And it was. Ted and company did everything to woo Moscow. They invited Soviet players to visit Atlanta. They sent Hawks players to visit the USSR. TBS aired a bespoke international exhibition tournament. Yes, that's Mike D'Antoni. Turner executives facilitated Arvydas Sabonis' medical care, even though the Hawks didn't have his rights. They arranged for a Lithuanian legend to participate in the NBA three-point contest. At the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, where the Soviet men did indeed win gold, the Hawks presented Sarunas Marshallonis with an NBA contract. He signed it, and the Federation just changed their minds. Nope. The Hawks tore up the contract, fearing punishment for Sarunas or Ted. They would just have to keep trying. The Hawks believed they were alone in this pursuit, but they were not. All the while, Donnie Nelson had been lurking. When the Hawks came to Seoul, so did Donnie. And after the Atlanta signing fell through, Donnie spent much of 1989 sleeping on Sarunas' couch and volunteering around Vilnius. He was being a pal, but also obviously recruiting, promising more money, promising more minutes. Neither side lacked persistence, but in the end, the difference was the audience for that persistence. Unlike Atlanta, Donnie and the Warriors had no relationships to preserve with the Soviets. They played the Lithuanian angle. On June 20th, 1989, Russian chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov staged a press conference in Moscow with several Soviet athletes and Donnie. It was a grand challenge to the Soviet sports agency. For Nelson, it was an opportunity to say, the Warriors will sign Sarunas, he will come play for us, you do not have grounds to stop him. And that's how it went. Sarunas Marshallonis was a pioneer, thrust all at once into not just American basketball, but American culture. Halloween, supermarkets. Thankfully, Sarunas was ready, or at least he got ready fast enough. His slashing style fit right in. This was his signature move, using those big paws to go behind the back at full speed and finish lefty. It just worked at the NBA level. Off the court, Sarunas had his family, a translator, and of course, his friend Donnie. He even got to play against other Eastern Europeans. Jack McCallum dubbed them the Green Card Five. 2 Soviets, 3 Yugoslavians. All of them debuted in that 89-90 season. Separate from the Soviet affair, Drazen Petrovic of Croatia had already defied Yugoslavian rules to go play in Spain. In '89, he finally reported to the Portland Trailblazers, who held his draft rights. One can only imagine the majesty of a Petrovic-Sabonis pairing because the big Lithuanian didn't come over until 1995. Petrovic became the star of this bunch, named to an All-NBA team before his sudden, tragic death in the summer of 1993. Drazen's friend Vlade Divac was a Lakers first-round pick in 1989, and he remained a fixture of basketball in Serbia and the NBA thereafter. Here is another great 30 for 30 if you want to know more of the Yugoslavian story. Serbia's Žarko Paspaj was undrafted, but he connected with Greg Popovich and played that season in San Antonio. And he also uttered one of the most lyrical quotes I have ever read. And then there's the Hawks. Stan Kasten finally signed someone, Marshallonis' Soviet co-star. Alexander Volkov of Ukraine didn't have a long NBA career, but he had one. By waiting, working, politicking, and then waiting some more, the NBA had punctured the Iron Curtain. A pipeline to the superior Eastern European talent pool was now open. Ironically, right before the dissolution of the USSR and Yugoslavia into numerous independent nations and basketball teams. Arvydas and Sarunas both got to wear green in the '92 Olympics. You know what else is ironic? In the 1990s, with the basketball world much freer and more open than before, the Hawks kind of lost interest in drafting players from overseas. Donnie Nelson, however, did not lose interest.
Thanks for watching. If you liked that, I think you would really like the Secret Base Patreon. There's over an hour more of the Donnie Expedition already published on Patreon, ready for you to watch right now if you subscribe. If you are zonked on the couch and that's too much to ask right now and you just want to watch some more YouTube videos, I've got some recommendations coming up as well. I got you.